Welcome in. Take a closer look at this Mercury dime, because a few tiny details can reveal why collectors pay such close attention to coins that seem ordinary at first glance. Step 1. Hold a 1941 Mercury dime under a good light, and the first thing you may notice is how familiar it looks. Liberty in her winged cap, the date at the lower edge, and a small mint mark hiding on the reverse. But look longer, and the coin starts to reveal a much more complicated story. Experienced collectors do not stop at the date or the fact that the dime is made of silver. They examine the surfaces, the strike, the reverse bands, the shape of the mint mark, the originality of the luster, and even tiny details left behind by the dies that struck it. The 1941 is particularly interesting because millions were produced, yet truly exceptional survivors can be surprisingly competitive. There are also recognized varieties associated with the mint mark, including repunched mint marks and a distinctive large S variety, while full bands examples can command a completely different level of collector attention. Later, we will separate ordinary circulated pieces from certified high-grade coins, examine documented auction results, and see why some authenticated examples have become important prizes for Mercury Dime specialists. But before judging what this coin might be worth, we need to examine exactly what it is, and one detail in the description of this coin changes everything. The first correction is crucial. A 1941 Mercury dime was not minted in Philadelphia. The S means it was struck at the San Francisco Mint, and that distinction is fundamental to identifying the coin correctly. In 1941, the Philadelphia Mint produced the regular 1941 Mercury dime without a mint mark, while San Francisco struck 43,090,000 examples bearing the S. PCGS lists the 1941 S with a mintage of 43.09 million, and NGC likewise identifies San Francisco as its mint. The coin belongs to the final years of a design that had been circulating since 1916, when sculptor Adolph A. Weinman's winged Liberty head dime replaced the earlier Barber dime design. The obverse shows Liberty wearing a winged Phrygian cap, an image intended to symbolize liberty of thought. The popular name, Mercury dime, came from the resemblance of the winged cap to the headgear associated with the Roman god Mercury, but the woman represented on the coin is Liberty. On the reverse, a fascie stands beside an olive branch, combining ideas of strength, unity, and peace. United States of America surrounds the design. EPLURIBUSUNUM appears across the upper field, and one dime identifies the denomination. Weinman's work gave a tiny 10-cent coin the visual vocabulary of a classical sculpture, and by 1941 Americans had been carrying that design for 25 years. Now look at the physical object itself. The 1941 Mercury dime is composed of 90% silver and 10% copper, weighs 2.5 grams, measures approximately 17.9 millimeters in diameter, and has a reeded edge. Those specifications matter because they provide some of the first tools for authentication. A genuine example should be close to the correct weight and dimensions, although normal tolerances and decades of wear can produce small differences. The silver content also explains why these dimes have an important second life beyond their face value. After the United States abandoned silver in circulating dimes, older pieces became increasingly recognized as historic silver coinage. But intrinsic silver content is only the beginning of the collector story. When you examine the obverse, notice the texture of Liberty's cheek and forehead, the hair around the cap, the lettering of Liberty, and the sharpness of the date. On the reverse, study the fasces, olive branch, lettering, and especially the horizontal bands wrapped around the central bundle. These areas reveal how effectively the dies transferred their design onto the silver planchet. A coin can be technically genuine and still be worth only a modest premium if it spent decades in circulation. Another example from the same production run can survive with brilliant luster, almost no contact marks, and unusually sharp detail, and suddenly the conversation becomes much more serious. The historical setting makes that contrast even more fascinating. The year 1941 was a turning point in American history. The United States was still emerging from the economic consequences of the Great Depression, while industrial activity was being transformed by the growing demands of national defense. Europe had already been at war for years, and in December 1941, the attack on Pearl Harbor brought the United States directly into World War II. The Mercury Dime was not created as a wartime commemorative. It was ordinary circulating money, designed to move through the economy every day. A 10-cent piece could pass from a worker to a shopkeeper, from a bank to a streetcar conductor, and from one household to another without anyone imagining that it would eventually become a historical artifact. Millions of 1941's dimes therefore entered circulation at precisely the moment American life was about to change dramatically. Some were heavily worn and eventually disappeared into the melting and recycling of old silver coinage. Others were saved by chance, tucked into collections, stored in bank rolls, or simply spent very little. That uneven survival is one of the hidden forces behind modern rarity. PCGS estimates approximately 60,000 surviving 1941's dimes across all grades and about 10,000 at MS-65 or better, although these are expert survival estimates rather than a literal count of every surviving coin. So the question is not whether millions were originally struck. The real question is how many remain today with the exact combination of preservation and technical quality that advanced collectors demand. That brings us to grading, where an apparently ordinary silver dime can enter a completely different world. A circulated 1941's may show wear first on Liberty's hair, cheek, and cap, while the reverse will gradually lose definition in the fasces, olive branch, and lettering. Once a coin is believed to have never circulated, professional graders place it on the mint state scale, from MS-60 upward, with higher grades representing progressively stronger preservation. At this level, collectors scrutinize contact marks, hairlines, luster, strike, surface texture, and eye appeal rather than simply looking for the absence of obvious wear. NGC currently shows the 1941's through very high mint state levels and notes that examples are plentiful through MS-67 full bands, although full bands coins represent only a portion of the surviving population. This is where value begins to separate sharply. NGC's current guide shows the ordinary 1941's reaching about $700 at its listed MS-70 level, while circulated pieces remain in the single-digit dollar range in the guide. A certified MS-66 or MS-67 example can therefore be substantially more desirable than a circulated dime, but a collector should not assume that every shiny 1941's is automatically worth thousands. In fact, a realistic high-grade coin may remain below the $1,000 threshold unless its grade, full bands designation, variety, or other exceptional characteristics justify a premium. The lesson is important. Certification does not create rarity. It documents the quality that already exists in the coin. Now turn the dime over and concentrate on the fasces, because this is where one of the most important distinctions appears. Mercury Dime specialists often look for full bands, a designation referring to complete separation and definition of the horizontal bands across the fasces. Strong striking pressure and well-prepared dies could produce exceptionally crisp detail, but not every coin received the same quality of strike. On an ordinary specimen, the central band area may appear partially merged or weak. On a full bands coin, the separation is much more distinct, and that additional detail can make the piece far more desirable to registry collectors and specialists. PCGS records an extraordinary auction history for the 1941's full bands issue, with a documented $28,175 sale for an MS-68 example at Bowers and Marina on November 9, 2006. PCGS also lists MS-68 FB examples at the top of its condition census. That result must be put into perspective. does not mean a typical 1941S is worth anything remotely close to that amount. It represents an exceptionally high-grade, authenticated coin at the elite end of the population. For a more ordinary premium example, a certified coin with strong but not extraordinary characteristics might trade around the several $100 level, while a superior full-band specimen could move toward $1,000, $2,000, or beyond depending on grade and demand. The exact market can change, and auction results are historical evidence rather than promises about future prices. What matters is why the bidders were willing to compete. They were not buying 10 cents of silver. They were competing for an unusually preserved piece of a particular date, mint, strike, and condition population. The 1941S becomes even more interesting when we move from grade to variety. PCGS recognizes several die varieties for this issue, including 1941 SS repunched mint marks designated FS501 and FS502, as well as the 1941 S large S variety, FS511. The large S is especially useful because the San Francisco Mint changed the appearance of its mint mark during this period. NGC notes that the familiar small s used on many earlier Mercury dimes was joined in 1941 by a larger S with a broad lower serif, popularly nicknamed the trumpet tail. These varieties are not imaginary anomalies invented by modern sellers. They are cataloged die characteristics that specialists can attribute. But that does not mean every unusual-looking S is valuable. Machine doubling, scratches, die deterioration, polishing, and damage can easily fool an inexperienced observer. A genuine repunched mint mark must display the appropriate diagnostics in the correct locations. PCGS records a $1,750 auction result for an FS502 full bands example, graded MS66FB, while the same variety without the full bands designation has a recorded $585 MS66 result. That contrast shows exactly how collectors think. The variety matters, but the grade and strike matter too. A serious collector will examine the date, identify the mint mark, compare its shape with recognized variety photographs, inspect the reverse bands, and then evaluate the surfaces before assigning any premium. There is another category worth investigating: proof-like appearance and extraordinary surface quality. PCGS separately catalogs 1941 S Mercury dimes designated full bands proof-like, and records a $4,200 auction result for an MS68 FBPL example sold by Heritage Auctions in January 2024. This is a perfect example of why photographs and descriptions must be interpreted carefully. Proof-like does not mean the coin is a proof. It refers to the unusual reflective character of the surfaces on a regular strike coin. A specimen with that combination of grade, full bands, and proof-like appearance occupies a very different part of the market from an ordinary circulated 1941S collectors. Also pay attention to color and originality. But silver coins do not receive the red-brown, or brown color designations used for copper cents. Instead, natural silver toning, luster, brightness, surface originality, and overall eye appeal influence desirability. Attractive original toning can enhance a coin, while artificial coloring, harsh cleaning, polishing, or surface alteration can reduce its appeal dramatically. For preservation, never rub the coin with a cloth, never use household chemicals, and never attempt to make an old silver dime shine. Handle it by the edges, store it in an inert holder or quality-certified slab, and keep it away from excessive humidity and reactive materials. Authentication should include weight, diameter, edge examination, lettering, mint mark diagnostics, and surface inspection. But for a potentially valuable coin, professional certification is the safest way to establish authenticity and grade. The 1941 S Mercury dime ultimately teaches a lesson that reaches far beyond this one date. Its 43,090,000 piece mintage means it is not a classic low-mintage rarity, and an ordinary circulated example is generally a modestly priced collectible rather than a four-figure treasure. But within that large production run are layers of rarity that become visible only when the coin is examined carefully. Exceptional mint state preservation, original luster, sharp striking, full bands, the recognized large S, repunched mint mark varieties, and rare proof-like combinations. PCGS estimates that about 10,000 examples survive at MS65 or better, while the condition census reaches MS68 FB territory, showing how dramatically the population narrows at the top. Depending on certification and characteristics, a strong collector-grade specimen can enter the 1,000 to $4,000 range, while the documented $4,200 proof-like full-band sale and the extraordinary $28,175 MS68 auction record demonstrate what can happen when multiple desirable attributes converge. Those numbers belong to specific authenticated coins and should never be applied to every 1941 S dime. If you are examining one yourself, start with the simplest clues. Confirm the 1941 date, locate the S on the reverse, check the weight and dimensions, inspect Liberty for wear, study the fields for cleaning or damage, examine the fasces bands, evaluate the luster, and then investigate the mint mark for recognized varieties. Only after those observations should value enter the conversation. The most fascinating part of this coin is that its real story is hidden in details measured in fractions of a millimeter. Millions were struck at San Francisco in a year when America was entering one of the most consequential periods in its history. But decades later, the survivors began separating into ordinary coins, attractive collectibles, and elite numismatic specimens. That transformation, from everyday money into historical evidence, and in rare cases, a fiercely contested collector piece, is what keeps the 1941 S Mercury Dime under the microscope. Step 2. A 1939 D Mercury Dime can pass through your hands looking like nothing more than an old silver 10-cent piece. Yet some survivors of this Denver issue have become remarkably desirable among specialists, because the real story is not simply how many were struck, but how well they survived. The tiny D on the reverse identifies the Denver Mint, while the sharply rendered fasces, the quality of the original luster, the preservation of Liberty's portrait, and the separation of the reverse bands can tell an experienced collector that this is a coin worth examining much more carefully. More than 24 million examples were produced, so this is not a classic low-mintage rarity in the same category as the famous key dates of the Mercury Dime series. Instead, its intrigue comes from condition rarity, exceptional strike quality, full bands examples, recognized varieties, and the scarcity of truly outstanding coins at the highest grades. Later, we will examine what authenticated examples have actually brought at auction, and why a coin carrying the same date and mint mark can have a modest collector value in one condition and a dramatically different value in another. To understand that difference, though, we have to go back to the world in which this little silver coin was made, because by 1939 the Mercury Dime was already an established American design with a remarkable history behind it. The 1939 D belongs to the final decade of the Mercury Dime series, a coinage program that began in 1916 when the United States introduced Adolph A. Weinman's winged Liberty head design. The figure on the obverse is Liberty wearing a winged Phrygian cap, an emblem associated with freedom and the pursuit of liberty. The nickname Mercury Dime became popular because the winged cap reminded people of the Roman god Mercury, but the intended subject was liberty. Weinman's artistic approach gave the dime an unusually elegant appearance for a circulating coin, combining classical imagery with distinctly American ideals. The reverse is just as symbolic. At its center stands a fasces, an ancient bundle of rods representing authority and unity, with a battle axe at the top symbolizing readiness and strength. Beside it rests an olive branch, representing peace. Around these elements are United States of America, EPLURIBUS UNUM, and one dime. The imagery was created during the tense years surrounding World War I, and its themes of preparedness and peace remained relevant long after the war ended. The design is generally associated with Weinmann's artistic vision, and the Liberty portrait is widely believed to have been inspired by Elsie Cashel Stevens, although that identification has been discussed by historians rather than being an inscription on the coin itself. By 1939, Americans had been carrying this design for more than 2 decades, and it had become a familiar part of everyday commerce. The Denver Mint produced 24,394,000 Mercury dimes dated 1939, a substantial output that makes the issue readily available in circulated grades today compared with genuinely scarce dates in the series. The D Mint mark appears on the reverse, beneath and to the left of the fasces, and it tells us that the coin was manufactured at Denver rather than Philadelphia or San Francisco. Each dime was struck from an alloy containing 90% silver and 10% copper, with a standard weight of 2.5 grams, a diameter of approximately 17.9 millimeters, and a reeded edge. That combination was engineered for durability in circulation, while retaining the intrinsic value associated with silver coinage. The production process began with silver planchets prepared to the required specifications, followed by annealing, cleaning, upsetting, and striking between dies under substantial pressure. The strike transformed the flat planchet into a detailed miniature sculpture, raising Weinmann's portrait and lettering on the obverse while bringing the fasces, olive branch, inscriptions, and denomination into relief on the reverse. Every stage introduced opportunities for variation. Die wear could gradually alter the sharpness of details, planchets could develop imperfections, and differences in striking pressure could influence how completely the design appeared. That is one reason two 1939 D dimes produced from the same general issue can look surprisingly different decades later. The coin's original mint luster, strike characteristics, and surface preservation were determined long before any modern collector placed it under a magnifying glass. And 1939 itself was a fascinating moment in American history. The United States was emerging from the economic trauma of the Great Depression, although employment and industrial conditions were still important national concerns. Abroad, Europe was moving rapidly toward another world conflict. Germany invaded Poland in September 1939, and Britain and France declared war soon afterward, beginning World War II in Europe. The United States did not immediately enter the war, but the international crisis would soon transform American industry, employment, government spending, and daily life. Meanwhile, Americans continued using silver dimes for ordinary transactions, and a 10-cent piece still represented meaningful purchasing power. A Mercury dime could be spent repeatedly without anyone imagining that decades later collectors would care intensely about the exact quality of the strike on its reverse. Many of these coins traveled through countless hands, cash registers, banks, stores, and pockets. Some were worn nearly smooth, others were pulled from circulation early and placed aside. That difference in life history is crucial today. A coin with the same original specifications could survive as a heavily circulated VF example, a lightly worn about uncirculated specimen, or an untouched mint state survivor. The distinction is not cosmetic trivia. It is one of the central reasons the collector market treats different 1939 D dimes so differently. The first major surprise comes when the coin reaches the upper levels of mint state preservation. NGC describes the 1939 D as one of the consistently well-struck and lustrous Mercury dime issues, and notes that examples are plentiful through MS-67 full bands. That makes this date unusual in an important way. It is not necessarily difficult to find a nice, uncirculated 1939 D, but it becomes increasingly difficult to find one that combines a high numerical grade with outstanding surfaces and complete reverse band separation. Professional grading services evaluate mint state coins on a numerical scale, with MS60 representing the entry level of uncirculated condition, and progressively higher numbers reflecting fewer distractions, stronger preservation, and better overall quality. At the MS65 and MS66 levels, tiny marks, luster quality, strike strength, and eye appeal can determine whether a coin is merely attractive or genuinely competitive. By MS67, the standards become extremely demanding. PCGS estimates roughly 10,000 surviving 1939D examples across grades, with about 6,000 estimated at MS65 or better, illustrating that survival alone does not make the issue rare. The important scarcity develops at the elite end, where only a fraction of the survivors possess the exceptional combination demanded by advanced collectors. A certified MS66 full bands example can move into the low thousands depending on the marketplace and presentation, while a particularly impressive MS67 full bands coin may approach or exceed the $3,000 level. These figures are not fixed prices, and they should never be interpreted as a guaranteed value for an uncertified coin. The individual specimen, certification, originality, eye appeal, and current demand remain decisive. The phrase full bands deserves special attention because it can completely change the conversation surrounding a Mercury dime. On the reverse, the fasces contains horizontal bands that were intended to appear clearly separated when the coin received a strong strike. On many Mercury dimes, the central band detail is incomplete because of striking limitations or other production factors. A full bands designation is therefore reserved for coins meeting the grading service's requirements for distinct separation in those critical areas. For collectors building registry-quality sets, that distinction can be more important than the date itself. The 1939D is particularly appealing because its generally strong strike allows many examples to display impressive detail. Yet the finest combinations of grade, luster, surfaces, and full bands remain highly competitive. PCGS records an auction result of $42,300 for a 1939D MS69 full bands sold by Legend Rare Coin Auctions on September 26, 2019. That is an extraordinary result and should be understood in context. It represents an elite certified condition rarity, not a normal price for a 1939D dime. More recently, Heritage Auctions reported a 1939D MS68 plus full bands PCGS CAC example selling for $5,124 on July 17, 2026. That coin was described as sharply struck with distinct band separation and attractive purple, yellow, and frosty silver toning. Those verified sales demonstrate how dramatically the market can separate an exceptional top population coin from a normal example. A collector might encounter a lower mint state specimen for a few $100s, while a highly certified full bands coin can command several thousand, and an extraordinary finest grade example can move far beyond that range when serious bidders compete for it. The 1939D also rewards collectors who look beyond the basic date and mint combination. PCGS recognizes a 1939DD repunched mint mark variety, designated FS501, in which remnants of an earlier mint mark punch can be seen beneath the final D. This is an important distinction because the variety is created during the preparation of the die, making it fundamentally different from damage that happened after the coin left the mint. PCGS lists the FS501 variety and records an auction result of $2,795 for an MS65 full bands example sold in November 2018. Earlier numismatic references have also documented additional repunched mint mark forms for this date, although not every minor attribution carries the same collector premium. This is where caution becomes essential. A blurry mint mark, flattened lettering, scratches, die deterioration, machine doubling, or ordinary circulation damage should not automatically be labeled a rare variety. Genuine attribution requires identifiable diagnostics and comparison with established references or specialist photographs. The same rule applies to alleged mint errors. A genuine off-center strike, clipped planchet, major die break, broad strike, or other recognized mint error can be collectible, but the error must actually have occurred during production. Post-mint damage, filing, polishing, tooling, artificial alteration, or environmental damage cannot be transformed into a valuable mint error simply by giving it an impressive description. For a potentially important variety or error, professional authentication becomes especially valuable because the difference between a genuine die characteristic and damage can be extremely subtle. There is also the physical question of what happens to a silver coin after nearly 90 years of existence. Originality matters. Natural silver toning can range from soft gray and champagne shades to deeper golden, blue, violet, or multicolored surfaces. An attractive original color may increase a collector's interest when it complements strong luster and clean fields. Mercury dimes do not receive the red-brown, or brown color designations commonly used for copper cents. Instead, collectors evaluate silver coins through factors such as luster, toning, brightness, originality, and eye appeal. Cleaning is another major concern. A polished or harshly dipped coin may appear bright to an inexperienced viewer, but professional graders can identify unnatural surfaces, hairlines, altered texture, or other signs of treatment. A genuine high-grade 1939D should be handled only by its edges, preferably with clean hands, and should never be rubbed with cloth or treated with household chemicals. Storage in an inert holder, quality flip, or professional slab in a stable environment protects the surfaces from fingerprints, moisture, and contamination. Authentication can begin at home with a scale accurate to hundredths of a gram, a measurement of approximately 17.9 millimeters, examination of the reeded edge, and close inspection of the date and mint mark. But these checks are screening tools rather than substitutes for professional certification. Counterfeits can reproduce the general appearance of a silver dime surprisingly well, so a coin that appears unusually valuable should be evaluated by a recognized grading service or experienced numismatic professional before a major purchase or sale. What makes the 1939D Mercury dime enduringly collectible is therefore not one simple statistic, but the interaction of history, production quality, survival, and demand. Its 24,394,000 mintage means that ordinary circulated pieces are not inherently rare, and current guides place many low-grade examples close to the value of their silver content plus a modest numismatic premium. Yet the same issue becomes a very different coin when it possesses original mint state surfaces, superior luster, exceptional strike quality, full bands, or the recognized FS5-1 Repunch mintmark variety. Depending on the exact characteristics, certification, and market conditions, a strong certified example can realistically enter the 1,000 to $4,000 collector range, while the verified auction history shows that truly exceptional pieces can go much higher. The $5,124 MS68 plus full band sale and the remarkable $42 300 MS69 full bands record are reminders that auction records describe specific coins, not entire dates. For anyone examining a 1939D today, the most useful approach is to resist the temptation to judge the coin from its age or silver content alone. Look at the Liberty portrait for wear, study the fields for marks and cleaning, examine the reverse fasces for complete band separation, inspect the luster under proper lighting, verify the mint mark, and investigate any unusual feature against authoritative variety references. When a coin appears to have the combination of grade, originality, and rarity that advanced collectors seek, professional authentication can turn uncertainty into documented evidence. Nearly 9 decades after the Denver Mint struck these dimes, The most compelling survivors continue to demonstrate a remarkable truth of American coin collecting. Rarity is not always created by how few coins were made, but sometimes by how few were made well enough, or preserved well enough, to satisfy the highest standards generations later. Step 3. A small silver dime struck at the San Francisco Mint in 1937 can look deceptively ordinary at first glance. Yet this particular Mercury dime carries several layers of numismatic interest that only become visible when you examine the details closely. Its Liberty profile, the tiny S mint mark, the quality of the strike, the preservation of the silver surfaces, and especially the sharpness of the bands on the reverse, can separate an everyday circulated example from a coin that serious collectors compete to own. The 1937 S issue had a mintage of 9,740,000 pieces, making it the lowest mintage regular 1937 Mercury dime. But mintage alone does not tell the complete story of rarity. Professional population, data and auction records show that exceptional survivors can become dramatically more desirable as their grade and technical quality rise. Later in this story, we will look at authenticated examples that have brought surprisingly strong prices, while also examining why those results apply only to particular coins with extraordinary preservation, certification, strike quality, or recognized varieties. Before any value can be understood, however, the coin itself has to be understood, because beneath that familiar Liberty portrait is a fascinating piece of American history, industrial production, and early 20th century design. The story of the 1937 S Mercury dime begins with a design that was already more than 2 decades old. Adolf Alexander Weinmann's winged Liberty head dime entered production in 1916 after the Treasury Department sought new designs for several circulating silver denominations. Weinmann's Liberty wears a traditional Phrygian, or Liberty, cap with wings attached, an image intended to symbolize freedom of thought. The popular nickname Mercury Dime came later because some observers mistakenly associated the winged cap with the Roman god Mercury, but the figure was actually Liberty, not Mercury. On the obverse, Liberty arches around the portrait. In God W.E. Trust appears along the lower left area, and the date 1937 sits at the lower right. Turn the coin over and the symbolism becomes even more deliberate. A Roman fasces occupies the center, representing unity and strength, while an olive branch beside it represents peace. United States of America surrounds the upper portion. EPLURIBUS UNUM stretches across the top, and one dime identifies the denomination. The design was created by Weinmann, the same sculptor responsible for the Walking Liberty half-dollar, and its combination of classical symbolism and modern American ideals helped make the Mercury dime one of the most admired U.S. coin designs of the 20th century. The 1937 S, therefore, belongs not merely to a run of 10-cent pieces, but to a celebrated artistic era in American coinage. By the time the San Francisco Mint produced this issue, the United States was living through a complicated economic period. The nation had recovered substantially from the worst years of the Great Depression, but 1937 brought another sharp economic downturn, often called the recession of 1937–1938. Industrial production weakened, unemployment remained significant, and economic uncertainty affected American households and businesses. Coins like the Mercury dime were part of the everyday machinery of that economy. They moved through grocery stores, streetcars, restaurants, banks, vending machines, and countless ordinary transactions, carrying their intrinsic silver content as well as their 10-cent face value. The San Francisco Mint struck 9,740,000 Mercury dimes that year, substantially fewer than Philadelphia's 56,860,000 and fewer than Denver's 14,146,000. The S is found on the reverse, near the bottom beside the olive branch and above the denomination area, and it identifies San Francisco as the producing mint. That tiny letter matters greatly to collectors because it establishes the exact branch mint origin of the coin. The physical specifications are equally distinctive. The dime weighs 2.5 grams, measures approximately 17.9 millimeters across, contains 90% silver and 10% copper, and has a reeded edge. That silver-copper alloy was standard for U.S. dimes of the period, giving the coin both a bright metallic appearance when fresh and the ability to develop attractive gray, golden, blue, or multicolored natural toning as it aged. Yet because millions were struck for circulation, the majority of survivors experienced decades of handling, pocket wear, environmental exposure, and contact with other coins. That is where the difference between an old silver dime and a truly desirable numismatic specimen begins to emerge. A circulated 1937 S can be interesting and collectible without being rare in the strictest sense, and worn examples generally do not approach the values associated with elite certified pieces. The dramatic change occurs when preservation enters the equation. PCGS currently estimates roughly 2,500 surviving examples of the 1937 S across grades, with about 1,500 estimated at MS65 or better. Although survival estimates are not literal census counts and should be treated as professional estimates rather than an exact number of coins in existence. The PCGS price guide also shows how quickly values can rise with grade. Ordinary mint state examples can remain relatively affordable at lower levels, while higher-grade coins move into several $100 territory and elite examples can move substantially higher. As a realistic illustration, a certified specimen around the MS65 range may command a few $100s depending on the exact certification, eye appeal, and market conditions, while a particularly attractive high-grade example can enter the neighborhood of $1,000 or more. A coin around MS67 with desirable strike characteristics can move into the several $1,000 range, but that does not mean every 1937 S dime in a holder is automatically valuable. A collector must look at the actual grade, surface quality, luster, strike, originality, and market demand. The key lesson is that rarity is often conditional. A coin can be common in worn condition while becoming scarce when the standard rises to superb preservation. For Mercury Dime specialists, one of the most important standards is the designation known as full bands, often abbreviated FB. On the reverse, the fasces contains several horizontal bands, and a fully struck coin can show exceptionally clear separation between those bands. This is important because the San Francisco Mint did not produce every Mercury dime with identical striking strength. A coin may have beautiful luster and very little wear, yet still lack the crisp central band detail required for a full band's designation. That distinction can have a major impact on collector demand. PCGS lists separate pricing information for 1937 S Mercury dimes with full bands, and the premiums become especially significant at the highest grades. For example, a 1937 S in a strong gem grade with full bands can be worth well over $1,000, while a superior example approaching the top of the certified population can reach several $1,000s. One documented PCGS auction record for the regular 1937 S full bands issue reached $21,850 for an MS68 specimen sold by Heritage Auctions on August 11, 2010. That extraordinary result needs to be understood correctly. It was not the price of an ordinary circulated 1937 S, nor the expected value of every coin carrying the same date and mint mark. It represented an exceptional certified coin at the extreme upper end of preservation. PCGS currently lists an MS68 FB as the top condition census example in its database, with MS67 FB examples occupying the next level. This is precisely why collectors should never judge a coin's potential value simply by looking at its date. Two apparently identical 1937 S-dimes can have dramatically different market values because one has ordinary circulation wear and the other possesses extraordinary strike quality, surfaces, luster, and grade. There is another layer that makes this date especially interesting: die varieties and genuine mint errors. PCGS recognizes a 1937 S double die obverse variety designated FS101, including examples with full bands. A true double die is created during the die-making process, meaning the design itself is duplicated or shifted on the working die before coins are struck. That is fundamentally different from machine doubling, scratches, postmint damage, or a coin that simply looks unusual because of wear. The FS101 variety deserves careful examination because specialized variety collectors may pursue it separately from ordinary examples. Authentication becomes essential here. A supposed double die should be examined under magnification and compared with established reference diagnostics rather than judged from a photograph or an enlarged phone image alone. The same principle applies to alleged clip planchets, broad strikes, laminations, off-center strikes, die cracks, or other mint errors. Genuine errors can add substantial collector interest, but damage occurring after the coin left the mint does not transform an ordinary dime into a rare mint error. Counterfeit awareness is equally important because high-grade silver coins can attract attempts at alteration, including artificial tunning, polishing, tooling, added mint marks, or deceptive surface treatments. The best protection is to compare weight and diameter with accepted specifications, inspect the edge and lettering, study the surfaces under appropriate magnification, and when the potential value justifies it, submit the coin to a respected professional grading service. Certification does not make a coin rare, but it provides an independent assessment of authenticity and condition that can give buyers and sellers greater confidence. Condition itself deserves a closer look because grading a Mercury dime is far more complicated than simply asking whether it looks old or looks shiny. Circulated pieces are evaluated according to the amount and location of wear, with important high points on Liberty's portrait and the reverse design gradually losing their original detail as the coin changes from very fine to extremely fine, about uncirculated, and eventually mint state. Once a coin reaches mint state, numerical grades from MS60 through MS70 reflect differences in marks, luster, strike, preservation, and overall appearance. A 1937 S-graded MS64 might look impressive to a casual observer, yet an MS66 or MS67 can show a dramatically cleaner combination of surfaces and sharper detail. Full bands can add another important dimension because collectors want the horizontal bands on the fasces to be completely separated and clearly defined. Natural color can also influence desirability, but Mercury dimes do not receive the familiar red, red-brown, or brown color designations used for copper cents. Instead, silver coins may be described by their natural tunning, brilliance, luster, or eye appeal. Attractive original tunning can enhance desirability, while harsh cleaning can permanently reduce collector appeal even if the coin appears brighter afterward. This is why preservation matters so much. A valuable 1937 S should never be polished, dipped casually, rubbed with a cloth, or cleaned with household chemicals. Fingerprints can leave oils and acids on silver surfaces, so handling should be limited to the edges, preferably with clean, dry hands. For long-term storage, an inert, archival quality holder or certified slab kept in a stable, low-humidity environment is far safer than loose storage in paper envelopes containing harmful materials or containers that trap moisture. Ultimately, the 1937 S Mercury dime occupies an intriguing position between availability and condition rarity. Its 9,740,000 piece mintage is low compared with the Philadelphia issue, but it is not, by itself, proof that every surviving example is rare. What makes the coin fascinating is the way its value changes as the standards become more demanding. A worn example may be primarily a collectible silver coin, while a sharply preserved mint state piece can command hundreds of dollars, and an exceptional full bands example can reach into the 1,000 to $4,000 range depending on grade, certification, eye appeal, and current demand. At the very top, the historical $21,850 auction result demonstrates just how far a condition rarity can rise when an authenticated specimen reaches an elite grade. That sale should be viewed as an exceptional benchmark, not a normal expectation. For collectors examining one of these dimes today, the most important checklist is straightforward. Confirm that the coin is genuine. Verify the S, mint mark on the reverse. Weigh and measure it against the proper specifications. Inspect the surfaces for cleaning or alteration. Study the strike. Examine the fasces bands under magnification. And investigate any suspected variety against established references. If the coin appears unusually sharp, unusually clean, or potentially doubled, professional certification can become worthwhile because a qualified grading service can document attributes that are difficult to establish reliably at home. And perhaps that is the enduring appeal of the 1937S. Its story is not simply about a 10-cent piece made of silver during a turbulent decade. It is about how millions of nearly identical objects can leave the mint together, travel through American history for generations, and then separate into entirely different levels of rarity because of the accidents of preservation, striking quality, survival, and collector demand.